7, 5 through 7. Yep. Acts 7, 5 through 7. Now, again, this is Stephen preaching. He's on trial. He got falsely accused just like Jesus, and he's on trial just like Jesus was here. He reminded them of Abram, and now he's going to remind him some more of him. But he gave him no property of his own, not one little tract of land. Now, this is with the exception of the burial plot. There was no land where Abraham lived, because it was pre-given the law, but we see with Noah how there's a distinction of what was unclean and what was clean, considering he brought more of the clean animals on the ark. There was the distinction. So living in the confines of a burial plot would have been something Abraham would not have done, most likely. So he wouldn't have lived on the land that he buried his wife on. However, God promised that eventually the whole country would belong to him and his descendants, though as yet he had no children. So we remember this dream he had in Genesis where God tells him his children will be as numbers of the stars and the grains of sand. Yet at that time he had no children when that promise was made. And later afterwards he does the thing and has Ishmael. And then God later tells him more directly it's going to be Sarah's son with you that will fulfill this. Ultimately, it wasn't just fulfilled through Isaac. We see Isaac's son Jacob. It's ultimately fulfilled in that because Esau kind of is Isaac's son too, but he wasn't the one blessed. We see this fulfilled by the time of the Exodus. How he has so many, prior to the Exodus, the first chapter of Exodus, we see how Egypt is so concerned about the numbers of Israelites that he's killing them all, having the baby boys die. So we see by that time this is fulfilled, that his descendants are very numerous. But they did not have that land yet. We don't see that. They don't gain their land fully up until the most land they gain is during the reign of Solomon. Up until that time, they're having a struggle fighting for it. Solomon's time, they gain the land, don't have to fight for it. But then the division comes between the kingdoms after Solomon. So it's divided then. But the land is fulfilled in Solomon, through Solomon, because of David's faith as a king. But due to David's sin, God promised that he'd have to battle, but Solomon didn't have to because of David's faith. But God also told him that his descendants, these descendants of his would have to leave the land and live in a foreign country, and there became slaves for 400 years. Now, God didn't tell Abraham it was Egypt. We know that it was Egypt through the later part of Genesis and the early part of Exodus, that it was Egypt they went to. It would have been odd for Abraham, considering some of his servants came from Egypt, for it to have been Egypt. So God don't tell us everything, because sometimes we may react negatively based on that. We also see how this comes about through a famine that God leads and sends. So they go to Egypt. God allows them into slavery after they reach a place of promise. Joseph's high rank there, so of course then his family would have been appreciated, but somehow over the years they forget who he is and then they become slaves. So this is about how it kind of happened only by God allowing it to. Because the world would have been seen that this man got them through the famine. And he would have been somebody held high of honor. But God's plan was for them to lose that honor for him so they could become slaves. It was also done not to draw them closer to God as they left, recollect them, allow their numbers to be there, allow time for them. They could have went in and took the land if they're obedient. After they got the law and they set up purpose of the law, they could have went in if they had faith to do so. I lost my train of thought. Moses was called specially from God to do this. Moses was put in a place of position, much like Joseph was, to bring these people out of that land. One thing, Abraham wouldn't have been able to take the land. As many servants as Abraham had, he didn't have enough people to keep the land, even with God on his side. Plus, it wasn't God's plan for him to have the land. It was his plan for his sons to have the land. Up until Joshua came back into the land, the only property that was entitled to Israel was that burial plot up until that point. They lived places, but they never owned any land. They had wells, but they never actually owned any land. They never actually bought any land. They never fought for any land until Joshua was led in by the Lord. But I will punish the nations that enslaved them, God told him, and afterwards my people will return to his land of Israel and worship me here. Okay, I remember what I was going to say. It was done to show them God's power, and to show the world God's power, and to bring a fear upon Israel. We see it was over 40 years later, after the plagues, that Israel came in to Jericho. Yet the people heard the stories of 40 years earlier and had a fear for these people because of the God they served. God showed who he truly was, and it necessarily wouldn't have been done. That fear wouldn't have been done if they didn't go in Egypt, become slaves, and God bring them out of it. Sometimes God has to bring us down into things so other people can realize who's standing with us through things. That's what had to happen to Israel. They had to become little so that everybody else could see how big God was and that God was behind them. It's through the struggles that we often draw closest to God. It's through the struggles that people look at us closest, though. Oftentimes they look for us to mess up. And because of that, it's through the struggles we can show God through how we act the best and most effective.